Running a distribution business isn't for the faint of heart, and neither is this podcast. Join your merry hosts, Matt Johnson and Dave Bent, as they explore topics related to B2B e-commerce that will help you build a business that stands the test of time. So go ahead, grab yourself a pint and pull up a stool. It's time for the Distributor Pubcast.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome. How we doing?
All is good, mate. How are you?
Doing awesome. Thanks.
All is
Dave,
good.
what's
Yeah,
up?
all is good. All is good. It's still a little early for a pub drink, but I'm ready. Arizona.
Are you telling me that you're abstaining for this
No,
episode?
no, definitely not. I'm ready to have the fight of the whiskeys with Paddy.
All right. Well, before we even introduce our guest today, we always like to talk about what we're drinking. So let's go around the table. What are you guys sipping on today?
I think Paddy's got to go.
I'm going to go last, right? Because I'm going to let you guys embarrass yourself, and then I'm going to
Yeah.
steam in like a Mack truck and just take you out completely.
I know I am kind of embarrassed. I'll start off because I thought, it would be appropriate to bring out a bit of Scotch whiskey, but I know that I'm going to get blown away. So I'm actually drinking what Dave knows is my favorite kind of daily kind of Scotch drink, which is Johnnie Walker Black Label. So
Nice.
it's better than like a Dewar's, right? It's got a little peatiness to it. It's got a little bite, but it's very casual and it's affordable. So, and then Dave knows at the rate that I drink, there's no way I could handle all these single malts and the expensive stuff. It's just wasted on me. So
Solid
Dave,
choice, Matt.
All right, not bad, right? Not bad.
Yeah, that's a pass.
For over here,
Well, knowing that Paddy was coming on, I just wanted to antagonize him. So I got a nice Irish Jameson.
Jameson.
Black Barrel.
Black Barrel. Okay. Yeah.
That's not bad.
He's thinking, oh, that's terrible.
Trying to work out how to be polite here.
That's a good the glass, but it's
that's
good.
a good choice, Dave. Conor McGregor might disagree, but I think that's a pretty solid choice.
No, it's pretty good. I did the Jameson tour when I was in Dublin, and that was actually
good,
a lot of
right?
fun. Yeah,
It's really good.
yeah, it's really a fun.
Yeah, I've done
thing
it
to
myself.
do. So,
Okay, guys, I'm sorry, but this is the dim Mac, the death blow of whiskey. So this is a Dalwhinnie. So this is a distillery up near Aviemore in the Scottish Highlands, and it's called a Winter's Gold, right? And what's unique about this is you put it in the freezer, and it turns into a kind of oily, gloopy consistency. So when you serve it, it comes out like oil, and then as it comes up to temperature, the consistency and the taste changes. So every time you take a drink, it gets a little bit different and a little bit sweeter from the drink you took before. And it is literally, I've tried everything, right? I love malt whiskies, Taliskers, Juras, like you name them, I'm on board. But this is epic. So if you ever get the chance, get your hands on a Dalwhinnie Winter's Gold, get it all freezed up, get that oily consistency going, and then join the club when you see it come up to temperature. It'll just blow your mind. You'll never go back.
I think I know what's happening here, Dave. This is the situation that we talked about, right? So in Scotland, they don't know what ice cubes are. And so in order to get that nice icy consistency, they've got to put it and they freeze it and they turn it into a slushy. You know what a slushy is, Paddy? Is that?
Oh, I know exactly what a slushy is, mate. Yeah.
yeah.
Fabulous. You'll never go back.
I was joking to Dave. I was saying how when I visited St. Andrews, we were trying all kinds of amazing local whiskeys up there, and we'd go around and we said, "Can we have some ice?" And they would give us one little ice cube, this big, and we like, "Can we please have some more?" No, can we have some more? You know
why, right? Because if you have too much ice, then you water down the taste of the whiskey. So it's kind of like saying, "Oh, can I have Diet Coke for this whiskey?" You might get stabbed for that in Scotland. So asking for too many ice cubes is not just as bad as an offense, but you're getting real close. So you just get one or two cubes, just enough to keep it chilled, but not enough to dilute the taste of the whiskey.
I definitely got the impression. I saw him going for the gun under the bar. He was not happy with me.
It was his ski and do, the knife on the sock. That's what it is. Anyway, cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Yeah. Cheers, guys. And Paddy, thanks for taking the time out.
Happy Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday. It's late in the day for you. We're working across 3 different time zones here. So Paddy's just outside Glasgow, and I'm in Florida, and Dave is in Arizona. And so we're kind of this is the Around the World Distributor Pubcast today, and we wanted to bring Paddy on because, to us, Paddy's he's a friend, and he's our partner, and co-founder of ES Tech Group and Evolution X, and of course we're excited about maybe learning more about your story. Of course, we know some of it, Paddy, but I don't think the world knows very much, and we wanted to get that out there, and we want to talk a little bit about just the beginnings of ES Tech Group, and the early days, and how that all happened. And but why don't you just kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of head into the history, and we'll ask some questions I think will be really relevant to our listeners.
Sure. So I'm Paddy. I'm co-founder and CEO, and I think how deep are we now? 16 years in. Feels like 16 years actually. It's been a long time. But long before I was a software guy, I worked in business supplies. Before I came on tonight, I watched the previous podcast with Matt at DDS, and it was interesting to listen to his story because we have a very similar background, right? We both came out of the distribution space. He came out of electrical, I came out of business supplies. But I think it's the same story in the sense that we both got into this to solve our own problem, right? It was born out of frustration of just not having any good options ourselves. So long before I was a software guy, I spent 10 years running distribution businesses, mostly in business supplies. I know that industry really well. And back then, I was also the guy who had to go out and actually present the e-commerce solution to customers. Now, back then, there really was only 2 solutions available to business supplies dealers in the UK and Ireland. So there was a product called OPIPS, and that was provided by one of the main wholesalers here in the UK, a bunch of guys called VOW. And then there was another product called OscarNet, and that was provided by the other wholesaler called Spicers, sadly no longer with us. And that was the only options business supplies distributors had back then. And so I would go to presentations. We had OPIPS, and OPIPS was cool, by the way. OPIPS did loads of really cool things. It was a fantastic product. It was super functional. A lot of the inspiration for the early functionality in Evolution X came from OPIPS because it just does things nothing else does. But you could just never rely on it, right? So you'd show up to appointments or presentations, and so I'm like the guy walking in the door with my heart pounding, thinking, is it going to come up? Is it going to be fast? Is it going to be slow? Is the demo going to work? Is it going to crash halfway through? And you could kind of bet that maybe 1 in 3 times when you go to a presentation, the thing would just fail, right? So great idea, fantastic functionality, bad execution. Really bad execution, right? Because Dave has this brilliant thing where he talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the very bottom pillar of the pyramid is you need something that's fast, reliable, secure. Doesn't matter that it's brilliant on SEO. If it falls over every 5 minutes, right, who cares? So OPIPS had things further up Maslow's hierarchy of needs pretty well dialed in, but the bottom layer was just toast. So I just got fed up walking into these presentations, getting my ass handed to me, and started to think, like, is there a better way? So I knew the market really well. I had a genuine frustration myself. And then I kind of fused that with a lifelong passion for software. And so I was a very unusual kid. I've been obsessed with software since I was 13 years old. I built my first program when I was 14. And so my introduction to software and the internet was, I remember coming off this. I can actually triangulate the exact moment where I decided that I was going to work on the internet. That was going to be my future. And it might take me 15 years to get there, but that was it. So I get off the school bus as a 13-year-old kid, and I walk through the front door. And at the time, I had very elderly grandparents who lived with us right in the house because they were sick, and they came to live with us. And my granddad was a sports nut, and so every time I'd come in from school, I'd be fighting for the remote because he'd be watching snooker or darts or some other very British sport. and I'd be desperate to watch this program called John Craven's News Round. Now, what John Craven's News Round did was they took the news of the day and they dumbed it down for kids, right? So whatever was happening in the world that day, they'd do a dumbed down version for kids. And I was like obsessed with this news show. And so back then, I remember them talking about this thing called the information superhighway. This is before we'd even called it the internet. And the demo, and it was only in America at the time, and the demo they showed was a document being sent from a computer on this side of the country and coming out on the other side exactly the same, right? So the full fidelity, the color, like the whole thing, it was identical. And this was in a world where we had fax machines, right, where everything came out in black and white. And I can literally remember my brain exploding and thinking, oh my God, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I don't know what that is, but that's it. Whatever that is, that's what I want to do. And I've been obsessed with it ever since. So got my first computer at 14, Commodore 64, wrote my first program on a Commodore 128, had a ZX Sinclair Spectrum, moved up a gear. And I've been obsessed with software ever since. So it's been a side hustle for me, a side project, an enthusiast, a passion project, whilst at the same time running and building businesses. So if you think about it, I had the distributor background, had the frustrations, knew the market, knew the problems we were trying to solve, and knew software. So the logical thing to do was to just make a bet that we could just go and build a business that would build a better product than OPIP. So the original genesis for the company was, can we build something that's better than OPIPs, that does the same functionality but looks nice? And at the time it was actually Tesco.com that we tried to model the design on. Tesco's like our version of Walmart. They tried, they were one of the first guys with a really pretty looking e-commerce platform. So the original genesis of the business was make it do all the things OPIPs does, but make it reliable, fast and consistent, and make it look and work and feel like Tesco.com. So we did. That was the genesis of the company, and that's how I got into B2B e-commerce.
That's awesome. And so Paddy, I imagine that when you started that, obviously you have all these connections in the office products industry there in the UK, and I'm guessing that it wasn't too hard to pitch the first few sites, seeing as there was a real frustration with the current kind of product that was the market leader. So tell me a little bit about that, and let's talk a little bit about like sort of this evolution of the office products industry right at the time, because this is what, 15 years ago?
Yeah, 16 years ago. Yeah, that would be right. So we got our first few customers like most people do when they do a startup. You had a lot of friends and mates in the industry, so we went and reached out to our pals and said, hey, listen, we've got this thing we think is good. We'll give it to you for free for 3 months. Check it out. If you like it, pay for it. If you don't, tell us and we'll make it better. So that's how we got our first few customers. At the time, I was pretty well connected in the industry. So I sat on some of the steering committees on some of the governing bodies in the industry. So I had good connections with business supplies distributors and was able to leverage that position. So that's how we got our start. But the dealers have changed a lot since then. And so if you really want to get into the evolution of the office products dealer in the UK, if you go back, if you go way back, if you go back 25, 30 years ago, what you really had was a ton of small, mostly family businesses. Actually, it's actually shocking the amount of family-run business supplies distributors there are. And I think that tends to be a trend in distribution, right? There's a ton of family-owned businesses. And what those guys looked like was small operations, orders coming in on the telephone, small range of traditional business supplies products. So things like pens, paper, envelopes, ink cartridges. And when we say small, in this context, we're kind of talking 8 to 10,000 SKUs, which we would all consider to be very small. Sourcing from a single wholesaler. Okay, none of this like 10 suppliers, 20 suppliers, check at night who's the cheapest, who's got stock, bring the product in. No, they had like one supplier. It was one of the big wholesalers who had a duopoly over this market in the UK and Ireland. Delivery was like the next time the van's in that area. right? That's what delivery looked like back then. There was no next day, 48 hours, 72 hours. It's like, yeah, the van's up there a week on Tuesday. That's when you'll get the stuff. It's a pretty high margin business because there was a ton of people selling stuff at less price, right? You're talking like 50, 55, 60% gross margins back then. And very low competition because you kind of were the guy in that area, and then there was a different guy in that area, and everybody kind of bought locally. So as far back as I can remember, and I have a similar story to you, Matt, my family owned a business supplies distributor back in the day. So that's why I've got such a good, understanding of the business. So that's what their business looked like. I've just described to you a business called Arena and another business called WGib. That's just what I've described to you there. But then, excuse me, guys, mail order changed everything. So Viking showed up. So Viking Direct were a big mail order operation in the US. The UK was their first kind of international expansion point. And so they show up in the UK sometime around about 1990. And they just carpet bomb the entire country with these 50, 60 page brochures, flyers, mailers, whatever you want to call them. And the big innovation that Viking brought to the market was these things were street priced. And that sounds obvious, right? But back then it was like a total innovation because distributors were just sending out list price catalogs and then with each customer negotiating a discount off list kind of percentage. So it's like, here's the catalog, you get 30% off list. You're a really good customer. Here's a catalog, you get 35% off list. Whereas Viking were just like, here, you can have paper and it's 10 quid a box. And so back then that was unbelievably disruptive. But having said that, the industry did a fantastic job of reacting to that. So very quickly, the wholesalers and the buying group scrambled and they developed their version of the Viking mailer, printed hundreds of thousands of them. And then each distributor would buy a couple of thousand of these, stamp their logo and their contact information on them, and send them out to their customers. And bang, all of a sudden, they're effectively going toe to toe with Viking. And the only reason I tell that story is because business supplies distributors are incredibly versatile, way, way more than they get credit for. Maybe resilient's a better word, actually. They're incredibly resilient, right? Don't forget, the demise of these guys has been predicted for as long as I've been in the game. So Viking was going to take them out. Then it was going to be Lyrico and Corporate Express. And these were a class of distributor that we call contract stationers back in the day. And what they did is flooded the market with field sales reps. Okay, they just put thousands of guys on the road in Ford Fiestas and just flooded every industrial site, industrial park in the country. So they were going to be the end of these guys. And of course, the modern day instantiation of that is the internet. Okay, so the internet was going to take them out. And of course, Amazon being the chief protagonist of that class. But guess what? It never happened because, these guys have managed these transitions, navigated them incredibly well. And I know it wasn't easy. I talked to loads of them, right? It wasn't easy. Believe me, I know it wasn't easy, but they did it anyway. And so I think about them as the tardigrades of the business world. Do you know what a tardigrade is? It's like a micro. It's the world's most resilient microorganism. So it's like a micron big. If you put it under a microscope, it looks like a little gummy bear. And these things are literally indestructible, right? You can fry them, you can boil them, you can microwave them, you can irradiate them, you can blast them into outer space for a week, bring them back, give them a little tickle, and they'll just wake up and go again. So I always think about the business supplies guys as the tardigrades of the distribution world. And listen, they've proved it again. They've proved it again during COVID. Okay, so that brings us right up to the present. So what does the modern business supplies distributor look like compared to that guy or gal from 25, 30 years ago? So in a lot of ways, it's similar. So you still have a ton of family businesses, but now we've got the emergence of this kind of regional super dealer trend that we're starting to see. And I think that's largely due to what I would call a mega trend, like in consolidation. So we're seeing tremendous consolidation in the business supplies industry. It's an ultra competitive business. Distributors are now competing against each other, regional super dealers, contract stationers, Amazon, their wholesaler. 2 of the 3 wholesalers now have substantial direct operations. What we're seeing is massive product expansion. So we talked about the 8,000 to 10,000 SKUs. Now these guys need to sell everything, right? They're selling everything from traditional OP through to furniture, janitorial, workwear, promotional gifts, coffee services, masks, sanitizer, face shields. So you've went from 8,000 to 10,000 SKUs to 80,000 to 100,000 SKUs. Deliveries next day at the latest. Next day is now considered a poor result. And if you're in a built-up urban area, then a lot of guys are offering same-day delivery services. And of course, we've got Amazon to thank for that, because they changed the expectations for everybody related to delivery. I think it's now what you would call a low-margin business. I think business supplies distributors are typically making somewhere in the late 20s to early 30s gross margins. There's some guys doing better, there's some guys doing less, but as an average, it's somewhere in that range. And that's a big drop from that 40, 50, 60% gross margin business we used to see in the past. But a substantial percentage of that turnover is now being transacted online. Okay. And if you think about it, business supplies distributors have actually been at the forefront of this online trend for at least the last 15 to 20 years. And they actually leave every other distribution market dead in their tracks in terms of adoption, right? You guys know we've got visibility into safety, electrical distribution, welding and gas, industrial, medical, and yet we don't see anything in those industries in terms of online adoption that we see in office supplies. It's a completely different ball game. So they've done a fantastic job leveraging the online opportunity. When we sign an office supplies guy, he's usually got 40, 50% of the turnover going online. He's coming to us from one system to ours. So we expect to get him up and running, have £1 million, euros, dollars, whatever currency you like, going through that website in zip time. But we just don't see that in electrical, and we don't see it in welding and gas, and we don't see it in medical and the other industries we're involved in. So they've been leaders. They've been leaders in that space. So what's the summary? The summary is that the market's got harder. It's got more competitive, but the distributors have done a fantastic job adapting and keeping up with that kind of ever-changing landscape. So that's how I see the evolution of the business supplies distributor.
Yeah, Paddy, I think this, because it's a very similar industry model, as you know, over here. And actually, it doesn't matter where you go around the world to rest of Europe, Australia, the model's the same. I think one of the interesting things is the online piece in a way was enabled by the wholesalers who provided the logistics and the, call it fast delivery, kind of 2-day, next day, and now same day. They kind of provided,
and the e-commerce platforms, Dave, as well. So if you take the UK guys, they provided the first e-commerce platform when nobody could bankroll that type of investment.
Right. So it's because we're in different industries, and anybody listening in from a different industry, the wholesalers actually had a major impact and still do today.
Yeah.
And because it's a supply chain that enables the distributor to compete with an Amazon, actually, which is pretty phenomenal. Yeah. But totally
definitely. I would say, Dave, it's like, of course, we're operating here in the U.S. And it's like looking into the future, right? When I'm listening to Paddy tell the story, right? And it's just like, we're seeing, it's almost as if we're 10 years behind, right? And it's like we're seeing this in multiple industries, this same story play out, right? Where it's like, even he mentioned, the big box, retailer come in with all of the boots on the ground. I mean, in the industrial space, that's Grainger. It's like, it's the same thing. And, these distributors are very resilient, but at some point they made the switch to become an online, primarily online dealer, right? So what I want to do is I want to explore how that happened and maybe some takeaways that we can apply to other distribution markets that maybe aren't as mature as the office products in the UK, and see if we can't come up with some good ideas. So we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side, we're going to explore, what's next for other less mature distribution markets.
We've never experienced change like this. Not this fast. 2020 was a turning point. Yeah, we're living in unprecedented times. A global pandemic has rocked the supply chain. Our economy is staggering, but we will rebound. One thing's for sure, the way we do business has changed forever. Zoom meetings, home offices, and the biggest online retailers in the world just keep getting bigger, pushing into B2B verticals and disrupting the market. Is this the end of the independent distributor? It's time to fight back. ES Tech Group is a superpower that distributors can deploy to defend their business, employees, and livelihoods against the biggest threats in the industry. Fusion Plus is a product content delivery service that works with the best brands in the world to deliver enriched product data to distributor stores that drive online sales. Evolution X makes enterprise commerce possible for distributors of all shapes and sizes. This feature-rich web store is designed for manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors. A configurable, intuitive platform that sets your online store apart from the rest. SpinStack Growth Agency offers omni-channel marketing and e-commerce enablement services that result in more traffic, better engagement, and increased sales. So many distributors have been sold a web store that simply doesn't sell. If you build it, they will come. Only works in a field of dreams. To win online, you need content, commerce, and communication. We've launched hundreds of web stores globally, accounting for billions of total revenue. It's time to put our group to work for you. We're here to help you grow. Learn more at estechgroup.io.
All right, good stuff. All right, so let's jump into the next question, which is, I mean, Paddy, you just kind of set it up really well. You know, like we learned about the history of the office products industry. What do you see happening, or what do you think are some of the things that need to happen for less mature distributors in different verticals in order to get to replicate the kind of success that those office dealers have had?
Yeah, I don't think they can do it on their own. So the office, Dave kind of alluded to this, right? The business supplies guys had a lot going for them. So I guess the big difference between business supplies and the other verticals that we're in is business supplies is a wholesale-led industry versus a manufacturer-led industry, okay? So that means a wholesaler, a $600 million, billion-dollar wholesaler has kind of showed up, corralled a whole bunch of manufacturers into a pot, solved big problems like standardizing content from each of these guys, and then so they've managed 200, 300, 400, 500 manufacturers on your behalf, got the content, the buying terms, the infrastructure, the logistics, and then just fed you a price file and a set of content for your website. Today, 15, 20 years later, that is incredibly elusive to us in these manufacturer-led industries like electrical, plumbing, welding and gas, and all the other ones that we've talked about. So I think that's the key distinction. I think where the industry's wholesale-led, it's actually easier to see that e-commerce adoption, and where it's manufacturer-led, because the distributor's trying to corral these manufacturers, find a set of content that can work from the website, have it standardized, and obviously Matt at DDS is solving a lot of those problems. Then you kind of need that to come together. I think you had a lot of consolidation in business supplies and ERP platforms. There's only kind of 3 or 4 that really matter.
Yep.
And so, you guys know distributors want the e-commerce site to just be an extension of their ERP system, right? Without the technical debt and legacy stuff that ERP brings, but they want the customer to be able to go in there and see their AR balances, to see their offline orders, to print invoices, to self-serve, to pay invoices. So they want to be able to do all of these things. But if you've got 10, 15, 20 ERP systems in a given space, that's hard, to spread that effort across a bunch of guys, where if it's just 2 or 3, and maybe if you do one of the 2, you get 60, 70% of the marketplace, then it becomes much easier to get a good result there. So I think business supplies was well positioned to be successful online because how organized the supply chain is, all the way from manufacturers through wholesalers, through content, through ERP. It kind of takes all those things to line up to get that result. Do you see it the same way, Dave, or would you say it's different?
No, I do. No, I think it is. The supply chain is there, which is is really differentiating. I mean, the idea, gosh, I know Ascendant here in the US was doing next day delivery, probably, certainly the 16 years ago that you're talking about, Paddy, which is mind blowing. Anywhere in the US, you ordered in the afternoon and you got it first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that is a learning is, for a while, I think even, office products, distributors, dealers, business supplies, to some extent, they also were in denial that, Viking was winning orders. And I think we see that actually in industrial, electrical, plumbing, and so on, all the verticals that are further behind. And I actually think there's a very easy question for a distributor to ask their customer. And the question is really simple. Where else are you buying product? Yeah. Just like, because what I think what happens with the internet, and I think it happened in office products, some of the sales just kind of bled away very slowly. They were able to go online and find the product somewhere else and get it delivered. And it's happening too in these other industry verticals that are somewhat behind. And it's like, okay, you don't see it immediately, but you're losing share of spend from an end customer because they found it easier to get or a better supply chain. And I think that's the eye opener, because it's like a slow, horrible phrase, but like slowly bleeding to death. Yeah. Terrible, but it's happening. And I think the really innovative dealers, distributors see that and they're getting ahead of it. And part of getting ahead of it is it's ultimately, where do you get the best customer experience, right? The customer's going to go where the experience is best, and the price is, I'll say, okay. Yeah. But anyway,
I don't know, boss. I worked for a guy like 1,000 years ago, and he drew me a graph once, and on this axis it was like degree of spend, and on this axis it was difficulty to buy. And the closer your product was to that convergence point, then the more suitable it was to be sold online. So if you think about business supplies, degree of spend, is it strategic spend to a company? No, it's completely discretionary spend. So it's almost at the very bottom point of that axis. And then it's difficulty to buy, right? You can get it everywhere and anywhere, retail, online, trade counter. So it's almost the perfect product to sell online. But when you look at these other industry verticals, you see a lot of the same stuff, right? Degree of spend versus difficult to buy. They're all down in this quarter here. So the products lend themselves to being sold online. And if you really believe the Amazon hype, you would eventually just say, listen, anything with a barcode on it or an EAN number is eventually going to be sold online. It's just a question, can distributors line up content, line up ERP? And honestly, I think one of the biggest things distributors in non-business supplies based industries need to think about, it's try to innovate on your business model so you don't burden the end user customer with the internal machinations of your business and how it runs. Okay, that's definitely something I've noticed with, branching it into these other industries. It's like the ERP is king, and they want to take all the complexity of the ERP and kind of make it the customer's problem. Yeah. Whereas Grainger aren't doing that, and neither is Amazon. You just go on, you get a price, you get a delivery cost, and you buy. But when we're talking to some customers who are like, hey, when the guy gets to the checkout, then actually charge his card for more than you're showing him, because we might need to charge fees and taxes and all this other stuff after he places the order. These are just the things they don't have to deal with when they buy for Grainger and Amazon. So I get all that stuff, but I think the biggest piece of advice is try and kind of contain that complexity to within the walls of the business and make the experience more frictionless for the customer. Yeah. Don't make them think, basically. That's it. Don't make them think.
And speaking of experience, I think that's the big thing, right? Is like, sounds like in the office products industry, what had happened was you're able to rely on these wholesalers to provide the content. And then, it was just a matter of, and then there was a consolidation on the software side, which allowed, I'm assuming, the integrations to be a lot smoother and easier to maintain. And I think what we have here and what we've been saying is that you really need to have sort of like these four fundamental components to your digital channel, and that is, you need to have content, right? So you've got to have a source of content.
100%.
I think it's just too much to ask an independent distributor to go out and manage like you said, 200-300 manufacturers, 20, 30, 50,000 SKUs. That's just untenable, right? This is not logistically possible for most of these distributors. So they got to have some source, whether that's a wholesaler, whether that's a content service provider like DDS we talked about last time. But it's more than that, right? It's also the commerce portion. You got to have a great solution. You got to have a great platform that actually fits your business model, and then you got to have that to be connected to the ERP.
Yeah.
And you've got to have some sort of communication strategy where you're actually out there, talking to your customers, cross-selling, upselling, communicating with them on a regular basis, staying in touch online. And so many distributors have maybe one or two of these things, but very few have all four.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what's hurt, at least when I look at distributors over here and these, less mature markets, it's like they can't put them all together for some reason. And, and I think to Dave's point, it's like the bleed is slow enough where it's not an urgency. It's not enough of an urgency to go drop everything. We've got to put together this complete solution, and we got to do it now. It's like they're going to wake up one day and they're going to be anemic because they've been, slowly bleeding for years.
Do you think COVID's impacted that, Matt? But do you think that's kind of changing on the back of COVID?
Yeah, I do. I think. Well, Dave and I, we were just coming back from a show where we were talking with a lot of distributors, and there was a noticeable sense of urgency. And I think that everybody understands now that you cannot just rely on the traditional sales channels, right? You can't. So it takes something like this to make you go, wow. If I would have had a online channel, if I would have had the content, if I would have had a great marketing, solution to be able to communicate with my customers, stay in touch with them, offer, contact-free pickup delivery, that would have been a game changer for me through COVID. And so many of them did not have that.
Yeah.
And I think they're realizing that the state of distribution, the state of really entire economy has changed forever because of COVID. So yeah, absolutely. It's had a huge impact.
Yeah, we've seen that as a business, COVID's changed everything as it relates to this subject. So guys who never cared about this at all now see it as one of the most important things to get done in the company. So I think about how this impacted the business supplies guys, right? All businesses everywhere on earth shut down, and you're in the business supplies industry, right? The clue's in the name. It was devastating for these guys, maybe with the exception of weddings and events or something like that. I mean, it was absolutely devastating. But again, they did a fabulous job adapting, and they leveraged some really quite potent short-term opportunities. So we had the shift to work from home. And of course, that kind of plays into the office products or the business supplies industry's hands. You have a whole bunch of people who need desks and chairs and monitors and laptops and footrests and all the other health and safety stuff you need to get people to work from home. So that there was kind of short-term artificial demand created from that. And then we saw the same thing happen on the COVID supplies fronts, where you had the masks and the hand sanitizer and the face shields. So they're kind of working against COVID, right? But if you think about it, their traditional sales model just got completely upended. So how do dealers or distributors find business? They knock on doors, they cold call. Let's examine the two things in a post-COVID world, right? If you might get knocked out for knocking on a door, right? Depending on where you go. Can you imagine, like, we're still in a semi-state of lockdown here in the UK. Can you imagine sending a rep out to knock on a door? You might get tasered. Okay? You might get tasered for knocking on somebody's door. You guys are on mute, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
No harassment.
Back, right?
Sorry, I was laughing too hard. I didn't want to disrupt you.
Is that going to be socially acceptable going forward, based on the fact that we might be in some kind of semi-lockdown thing, and it might kick in again at the back end of the year when COVID surges in the winter? So you've got that going on. So what's the alternative? Well, it's cold calling on the telephone.
Good luck with that.
you're cold calling empty offices where the staff are now tucked away in their residential property that you don't have the number for. So what does that mean, right? So what it means is the website used to be the vehicle just to transact with the customer. Going forward, it's going to be how you transact with the customer and how you communicate with them. Because guess what? When the trade counter closed and the office closed and the depot closed, what was the only thing you could make consistent for the customer? It was the website, right? And that's how you'd communicate, and that's how you would transact. And so I think companies are even seeing this as like a business continuity problem, right? I need a website like I need a telephone and a truck and a warehouse. It's one of the things on that list. It's table stakes. It's something you need just to be in the game rather than a luxury or some optional item you can plug in on the side. And one last thing I'll say about that, Matt, I don't know how we're doing for time here, but I will say, you think about what's happened recently in the last couple of days with Apple and the new iOS update. So guess what? Marketing is going to become harder over time. Platforms are now shutting down marketing. So if you launch Facebook or Instagram or any of these apps on your iPhone in the last few days, you're going to get a full screen pop-up that says, do you want this company to track you? And you either have to choose, yes, I want them to track, or do not track. What are you going to pick?
Yeah.
You're going to pick, do not track me.
Yep.
So the only reason I tell that story is it's going to be more important than ever for dealers and distributors to have a direct relationship with their customers and not going through an intermediary like Facebook or Google or some platform whose whole business model could get upended overnight by the whim of the Apple marketing department or the Apple privacy team.
To your point, Paddy, it's shocking how many distributors do not even know their customers' emails, right? Because they're
Build
not
an email list, simplest thing you can do.
So I mean, so you're right. It's like, what's going to happen if all of your communication channels are completely taken away from you? You don't even have a phone number anymore because they may not be in the office. These other, marketing communication channels are now going to be more difficult than ever to get your message across. And like, hello, you don't even have it. A simple email marketing could solve the problem, but you don't have it because you never asked for it.
Yeah.
So, it comes down to some basic, as we like to say, blocking and tackling, right? It's just it's the simple things that every business really should be doing. You should have an email list. You should have, some sort of lead generator. You should have a good website that is well designed, got a good experience. And, this is, like you said, it is table stakes now. It's
I think the minute you put somebody in between you and the customer, you're just begging for trouble down the line. There's short-term opportunities to be leveraged. I always tell people, I do Amazon and I get orders from Amazon. I'm like, great. But understand what it is. It's a short-term opportunity that you end up getting starched out of over time, right? When Amazon trades you out for another guy soullessly because he's got a better product or a better service or a better price on that item. So Amazon's a machine designed to starch the margin out of branded items. They will trade you out in a millisecond for somebody else. So like for the guys watching this podcast, honestly, if you take one thing, if you never listen to any of the other stuff, like the drink, what beer we're drinking or whiskey, like build an email list. It's the most powerful thing you can do. I know it sounds obvious. I know it sounds intuitive. I'll bet 80% aren't doing it. Everybody you meet, say, can I get your email? Can I put you on my list? Can I keep in touch with you guys? Do it over time consistently. Have everybody in the business do it. And when you get to 1,000, 2,500, 5,000 homegrown registrations, you've got something powerful there, and it's yours, and nobody can take it away from you. It's the most simple thing you could do.
awesome.
Matt, I've got one other dynamic just to add in for the folks not in business supply, office supply industry that I think is changing is the massive improvements in content, like product information. So videos and installation guides and the ability basically to now purchase online more sophisticated product. And so like we see it in electrical where Schneider Electric, which maybe not everybody's heard of it, but it's an industry global giant in the electrical space for very sophisticated industrial electrical equipment, actually now has a product configurator. So you can configure and research pretty sophisticated product. Rockwell Automation is another one. industrial automation equipment. And that would have been, gosh, even 2-3 years ago, not really thought of. So the improvement in content and the large manufacturers helping provide that is huge. And just the quality of video, 3D imaging is a game changer too, where there's industries where the view is you still have to talk to a salesperson. And in many cases, that's still true. And you could do it online, and some are doing it online. But the ability to now buy more sophisticated product is just getting going. And that's going to be a game changer in the industries that I think have been, to some extent, protected by that challenge.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Awesome. So guys, let's just go maybe around the table and or the virtual table and talk about what based on what we've just discussed, what are some practical steps? I mean, Paddy already mentioned the email list, right? I mean, that's great. If you have one or two suggestions in terms of getting started based on, what we've heard, what would you say? Like if you're behind the time, if you're saying it to a distributor who's, they're like, God, I gotta do something. Not really sure where to start. What advice would you give them?
I'll go. I'll jump in.
First, Dave,
It's a provocative one, which again, I think we saw in business supplies too, which is, let's just imagine for a minute, a pure play online reseller were to show up in your industry. What would it look like? What would it take? And can you start to think that way? Because I think that's what's happening. Like if I'm competing with Grainger, how do I compete with Grainger and not just become submissive because you think it's scale? I actually don't think it is scale. I think the tools and the opportunity, the content, it exists to transform a business, but you got to embrace the transformation and not succumb to the challenge. So yeah, what would a pure play online reseller look like?
Dave, I thought you were going to say digital transformation there. I was ready to take a drink. I know that's like everybody's favorite buzzword. Drink.
Hey, let's drink the digital transformation. There we go.
Hell yeah, we'll drink twice. Here we go.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, you're right, Dave. I guess like if I was thinking real practical. So, and again, let's go unorthodox. I would say two things. Number one, for every account you're managing on the telephone or face-to-face, can you really afford to manage that account face-to-face if you were truly adding up the cost, right? And so maybe you do an exercise where you segment your accounts and you say, okay, here's the top accounts and we can afford to go visit those guys, jump in a car, go and spend time with them, have lunch. There's enough money in those accounts to do that. But then here's a bunch of guys that we love, but we just don't make enough money on them to actually go visit them or have stand-up people on the telephone to go talk to them. You can manage those accounts online. You can ring fence them with content through a website, through a really well-executed email campaign. It's something really worth thinking about. And I'll tell you one thing. If anybody out there is thinking about getting a website or some e-commerce platform, whether it's Evolution X or something else, one of the lowest hanging pieces of fruit that you can just reach up and pick is lapsed accounts. So here's how this conversation goes every time I ask it. So when I talk to a distributor, I say, how many accounts do you have in the ERP system? And the answer is always 1,000, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000. And then I ask them, how many of those guys bought something in the last 90 days? And the answer's 500. Okay. So how do we take the 2,500 guys who know you, love you, bought something from you in the past, and don't forget, the easiest guys to sell to are guys who've already bought something in the past. You don't have to establish a new relationship. And maybe they left for reasons you don't understand. Somebody else's brochure or leaflet or email came in at the right time, and they were just top of mind and you weren't. Maybe they've got a service problem with the business that they've yet to disclose. But re-engaging those lapsed accounts through a campaign, through a website, is one of the cheapest, most effective things you can do. So here's how it kind of goes. So you say, we're going to take the 2,500 guys who used to buy stuff that don't buy stuff anymore. We're going to pre-register them on the website. So the login's already set up, ready to go. And we're going to send them a coupon code saying, come back to ABC Distributors, okay? And you're going to send them an email saying, we love you, we miss you, where have you been? come back and all orders for first-time buyers on orders above $200, you're going to get a 15% code if you use welcome back on the checkout. That is about the cheapest, most effective, most unbelievably effective thing you can do. Stand up for no money. You will get a percentage of those guys re-engaged, and it'll be way more effective than just ringing through that list saying, hey, how have you been? Why haven't we heard from you? Because nobody wants to take those calls. So if you wanted to take 2 practical things away, it would be segment the customer base into those 2 buckets I talked about, and go and do a campaign on lapsed accounts. It's a penalty kick.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we got a name for it, Paddy. It's like, look at the data and build the defector detector.
Yay, I like that. The defector detector.
Yeah, it's the guys where the sales are just kind of slowly going down, or maybe significantly went down. It's there. The data, they've got the data. It's in the ERP if it's not in the website. So yeah,
Man,
totally.
I'm really impressed, Patty. For a product guy, that was some pretty solid marketing advice. So you kind of stole my thunder, to be honest, brother.
White Rhino.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, that's some basic marketing that you can do. That's not going to cost you anything. And I guess my last thought on it would be catalogs, right? Because I come from a catalog background, and I just think that catalogs are everything. Content is everything. Look in your ERP, or look in your purchase history, and figure out which suppliers, which product categories, which products, which items, SKU numbers account for the majority of your sales, and go and build a catalog that you can use in a variety of ways, right? Whether it's literally printing out a flyer or a small catalog, or whether it's building an e-commerce website. It really starts with a catalog, right? It's just absolutely, you can't do anything online unless you have content. So going out and organizing your purchases, or organizing those product categories into a taxonomy, and then going out and getting that content. Now, if you want to do it the old-fashioned way and go mine it from the manufacturers yourself, it's going to take a while. It's going to take some effort. There are companies that offer that as a service. I'd encourage you guys to go take a look at that, and really spend the time, invest the energy into building a catalog, because it's one of the most valuable assets that you can have, beside your e-commerce website, your online channel. So that's really it. And if you can do those things, you're going to be off to a great start.
Can I throw in a Brucey bonus one for everybody?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think distributors should really consider professional sales training for their salespeople. So take the business supplies guys, right? So the future of that
online sales training, like digital.
I mean, just learning the sales process. You can't be a sales guy just because it says it on your business card. You have to go learn how to be a sales guy. I did it years ago when I was 21. I went to Los Angeles, did a course called MaxSax. Absolutely changed my life. They should teach it in school as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's a life skill. It's not just like a business skill. You're selling all the time, right? You're selling your wife. You really need that new iPad Pro when the one you've got from 2 years ago was great. So everybody's selling all the time. But learning to sell professionally and learning the sales process, personally for me, I can't think of anything I've done that's been more impactful than that. And so you think about the future of business supplies distributors, right? They're going to have to be the everything and anything company. I really think that's the future for these guys. And by the way, I think services might be the future for these guys as well. So if you go from a business where you're walking in and saying, hey, here's an ink cartridge, do you want to buy one of these? Like, that's a direct sale. It's just like, we got these at this price, do you want one? If you're kind of moving from that to, I need to walk in the front door of a building and be able to solve every problem these guys have, right? From the fruit bowl on the reception desk, to swapping out the LED light bulbs in the boardroom, to showing up with the coffee and the sandwiches every time they have a meeting, to sending a cleaning team in every night at 6 p.m. to clean the desks and hoover the carpets, as well as providing the copier and the toner and the paper and the envelopes, right? But here's the problem. You've now gone from a direct sale to a consultative sale. If you're going to walk in the door and talk to a facilities manager and say, dude, I'm here to solve every problem, but I need to know where the problems are. Now you need to know how to qualify. Okay, qualification, biggest thing in sales. Can you qualify properly? Do you know the right questions to ask? Can you handle objections? Can you pitch yourself? Can you pitch the company? Can you close the sale, cement the deal? I'm back to Max Axe now. What is it? Approach, qualification, agreement on need, sell the company, fill the need, close the deal, cement the deal. 7 steps to selling. Everybody should learn it. So if you don't have your people professionally sales trained, very inexpensively, you could put them through a course. Max Axe is one that I would recommend, and maybe Matt will link that in the episode. There's others, Sandler, and there's a whole bunch of different things out there. I've done 2 or 3 of them. What I tend to find about them is they're all much of a muchness, right? They're pretty much the same thing, just articulated in a different style. But I think as dealers move from a direct sell to a consultative sell, they would do well to have their people properly sales trained.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Definitely.
Couldn't agree more. And just a cherry on top of that, I would just say, not only do they have to have sales process and sales training, they got to understand how to sell online. They got to understand some basics about maybe how to use a CRM, how to send email, video, LinkedIn. It's a different world that we're in, and you can't teach an old dog new tricks, as they say. But I think you can. I think if they're willing, it doesn't matter what generation they're in. They can pick it up, and they can be successful. And you got to start planning for that next wave, right? These guys aren't going to be around forever. They have a ton of knowledge, a ton of experience, but you've got to put tools and training into the hands of the next generation that are coming into the sales roles. So this was great, guys. Great stuff. I think we're just about out of time. But thanks, Paddy, for taking the time out. I'll let you get to bed, man. It's got to be late. I think you're ready. You're probably going to work a little bit longer before you go to bed, but it was awesome having you. And what we like to say at the end of these is cheers to your growth.
Cheers, everybody.
All right, cheers. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Distributor Pubcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, we'd love for you to leave us a rating and review on the podcast player of your choice. You can learn more about us at distributorpubcast.com. This show is presented by ES Tech Group. We're here to help you grow. Until next time, cheers to your growth.